G'day folks, my name is Rob. Welcome back to another F1 Fantasy video. Today we are looking at my team selection for the Italian Grand Prix. So if you're new around here, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We'll take a quick look at how things were in Zandvoort. 178 points, and heading into qualifying, was feeling pretty good about this team. Very well documented. Logan Sargent struggled in FP3 with that crash, which meant he was not able to participate, and as a result was assigned a -5 point penalty. As a result of that crash in FP3, I wanted to be a little bit proactive with my transfers for Zandvoort and brought in Alex Albon and Valtteri Bottas in place of Sonoda and Sargent to obviously avoid that -5 with Sargent and the underwhelming race pace simulations for the V-Carb. Albon looked great in free practice, and I thought he was going to translate that into a good result for the Williams team, carrying upgrades into the weekend. But as it just turns out, I seem to have a knack for picking drivers that get disqualified, and Albon was exactly that, disqualified from qualifying after a Q3 appearance, which put me on the back foot with a -15 and an impending price decrease to go with it unless he turned things around on Sunday. He did turn things around, came away with 13 points on the Sunday alone, and would have been enough to guarantee him a $1 million increase. But clearly that -15 deficiency was not enough, or was too much for him to overcome, and his 13 points not enough to offset that. So finished the weekend with -2 and was probably a bitter pill to swallow, more so because not only I thought the decisions I made at the time were the right ones, but also because I had to deal with the George Russell disqualification the race prior in Spa right before the summer break. So obviously shouldering disqualifications either side of the 4-week break. 178 points, as I said. Otherwise, results to be expected across the board from all of the other drivers. But unfortunately, the Albon disqualification, George Russell underperforming on Sunday after a really good qualifying, and an anonymous race once again from Nico Hülkenberg was pretty much the end of what I could have hoped for in terms of a green arrow. So another rank drop. Things are in free fall at the moment. I think we need to mix things up in Monza, but there are quite a number of factors in play that would make me think I could probably swing the wild card in a few transfer decisions to hopefully get things back on the right track and a green arrow to recover from a few disappointing weekends of late. Now, this video is a short one, only because of the fact that I am traveling at the moment, don't have the same access to the usual tools and resources that I would ordinarily have, but wanted to cover off a few headlines regardless of that heading into Monza. And I think the biggest thing after what we saw in Zandvoort is that Ferrari appear to be back on the menu. And I think the reason for that is primarily because Leclerc and Sainz have very much looked the part compared to where they've been the last few weeks. Ferrari in particular, I think with upgrades expected at Monza and the fact that they have a historically good record there, top 4, top 6 appearances in the last few races, suggests to me that they could very much be an option to go a little bit off meta with the lineups we've had the last few weeks with McLaren and Mercedes. And I think as well, because they would be a bit of a differential asset, that's what appealing to me, particularly with the wild card in hand. I was waiting for Ferrari to obviously come back into the fray, and I think they're very much building up to that. They've outscored Mercedes, the constructor anyway, the last 2 races. Leclerc's on a streak of top 4 finishes at the moment, and I definitely think that at a track like Monza, home crowd with upgrades, all the signs are pointing to a good weekend for the Scuderia. So that's kind of why I'm leaning towards them right now. Another driver that's very much in the frame as well is Lando Norris. He had a blistering performance in Zandvoort. 56 points, the race win, pole position, driver of the day, fastest lap, everything. So I think at his price, still within reach for a lot of people running the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri. I think Lando Norris becomes very attractive if you don't already own him. He was 23 odd seconds ahead of second place in Max Verstappen. So I think the McLaren is far and away the best car on the grid. It seems to me that there isn't really an objectively best DRS boost option aside from Lando Norris right now. I think Oscar Piastri could contend. Max Verstappen on his day also excellent, but his price probably isn't quite at the forefront of many of our minds. So I think Lando becomes a very obvious candidate there. So I'm looking to bring him in to my team this weekend. And in order to do that, to enable Lando Norris, Logan Sargeant, or should I say Franco Colapinto, becomes the obvious target for my team. At the time of recording, it's been mere hours after Colapinto has been announced as Sargeant's replacement for the remainder of the year. And I think, assuming he comes in at 4.8 million, which many people in the F1 fantasy community seem to think will be the case, Colapinto could be a very handy budget enabler at that price. The Williams is on an upward trajectory. The upgrades seem to be working from what we saw in Zandvoort, and I think that's going to continue, not to mention the fact that Williams have a typically very good record there. One of their drivers has been in the points there the last 3 seasons. I think that's going to continue this time around. And with Sargeant out, I honestly don't know all that much about Franco Colapinto, but surely his DNF risk cannot be as high as Logan Sargeant. So I'm very much eyeing him off. On the topic of Colapinto as well, what that means for his driver card, what that means for Logan Sargeant's driver card in the F1 fantasy game is that Logan Sargeant should be updated in the next 24, 48 hours from when you see this as an inactive driver in the game. I think if you already own him, you could probably carry him through to this race and the races beyond. Now, I've not been in a situation myself where I've carried inactive drivers through to subsequent weekends. It's a possibility that you might just be able to hold him as a $4.8 million asset for the remainder of the season. If for whatever reason you're not forced to make transfers for him before making transfers to other drivers in your team, if you don't have to do that, I think a $4.8 million driver that's going to score you 0 and not change in price every weekend is certainly better than some of the Sauber drivers going around at the moment. You get a stable price in 4.8 million in Logan Sargeant, and ultimately that, if you could pair him with Franco Colapinto, enable you to get to a Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri double up if you're a lower budget team, or even get to a 3 premium driver lineup that some of you with $127 million in budget can afford. I obviously am nowhere in that ballpark, but I think Colapinto and Sargeant could be a double header or a 2-pronged enabler for that kind of lineup. So think about that if you're able to make that work. I will provide updates on Twitter in terms of whether or not the driver card for Logan Sargeant and the inactive allocation of that would mean you have to make a move for Colapinto regardless of that. But I think something to keep tabs on. If you're able to get 2 $4.8 million assets into your team, makes an extremely powerful and top-heavy team if you can get the likes of the McLarens, the Mercedes, the Ferraris, etc. in there as well. So they're kind of the key topics I'm going through at the moment for my team this weekend. And I do want to bring that up quickly just because I think there is quite a few different combinations to go with. The obvious one for my team at the moment seems to be a 2-trade switch up if I don't go down the wildcard route. The easiest play for me would be Lando in for Oscar Piastri and then Logan Sargeant, or what would ultimately be Colapinto in at 4.8. Now, I could move for Logan Sargeant early and just hope that I don't have to make a forced trade for Colapinto once Sargeant's already in my team and hold that for the foreseeable future. But for right now, that could be what it looks like. An alternate would be for me, if Ferrari do look good in free practice, would be to bring in the constructor. And why I like the constructor over, say, Leclerc or Sainz specifically is because they have what would I consider a route into fast pit stop points. They're not quite on the same level as Red Bull, but they do have the second highest average pit stop points among all constructors in the game this season. They also have the second highest average qualifying teamwork points behind McLaren, the only team to have both drivers feature in Q3 in every race this season. So I really like Ferrari in that sense. And I do think, Leclerc does look like a decent shot at a podium most race weeks from what we've seen. So Sainz obviously has to do a bit more heavy lifting, but I really like Ferrari for that. I think, again, going down this line of thinking Lando Norris, I could squeeze in here. I'd probably then have to get in Sargeant / Colapinto into this slot. Would require me to downgrade a Hulkenberg or an Albon. So if we drop the $4.8 million asset there, that would mean, could we fit in Zhou? I might just be able to squeeze in Hulkenberg, Sonoda, kind of anyone within the $10.5 to $11 million range. Not that there's much for me, but enough. Even Gasly potentially. I like the look of him as well. You know, I don't mind this team at all. Russell, I think, as the most affordable B-tier driver that has a shot at scoring 20 points most weeks, still, I think, provides a lot of value. Just been a bit unlucky lately. So his price obviously not as high as it probably could be, but again, relying on Mercedes to continually deliver good results week in and week out for the time being. Otherwise, I could well swing the wild card. If it gets to this point, I'm taking multiple hits, bring in a Sainz or a Leclerc. That would give me enough to get to Bottas. Maybe at this point, I'm probably looking at a bunch of different scenarios, but this team would mean a top heavy approach, probably forsaking on the cost cap gain just a little bit. But that's my team selection for this week. Unfortunately, it's going to be a short one because I am on the road at the moment and won't have the time for a race week preview video, unfortunately. But do follow along on Twitter for all of my updates there. I will still be trying to tweet as regularly as possible on all of the Colapinto news, on all of the FP2 results and such on the Friday and in the lead up to the deadline. So be sure to follow me over there if you haven't done so already. And if you've got any other questions in relation to team selection and the like, be sure to drop a comment below because I will be monitoring the comments on YouTube this week as well. But I will leave it there for now, guys. As always, thank you for your support on the channel thus far this season. Looking forward to an exciting Italian Grand Prix this coming weekend, and I'll see you all very soon.